Hi, good morning. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joanna Nelson, and I am with the New Mexico Economic Development Department. And we are really excited that you could be here with us today. You've tuned into one of the Economic Development Department's webinars during our series of discussions around COVID-19 relief and looking at resources and opportunities to help our businesses in the state recover. So we're really lucky to be joined today with some great partners and to start that conversation and answer any questions that you have. Before we get started, I did want to let you know that we are recording this session. So we will post this link in an email to the recording, and we will get that out hopefully this afternoon, and you can access the recording on our YouTube channel. And we will send the presentation out in a PDF, so you'll be able to access all of the information and access the links too. If you have any questions, please, we encourage you to ask those questions while we're going, and at the end of the presentation we will do our best to get to those questions. So please put your any inquiries, questions you have in the questions box, and we will get to those. I did want to give a little bit of overview of EDD's response to COVID-19. We have really been hitting these hard in all of our webinars, really wanting to create awareness around the programs that we have that are currently in operation for businesses and communities. And hopefully this is over repetitive and you already know about this, but to be on the safe side, we do have the COVID-19 Business Loan Guarantee Program. So this is the program that we created months ago at the onset of the pandemic, and we're really seeing businesses take advantage of this now that they have accessed some of the federal programs. But this is still available. If you are getting a commercial loan at this point, we can guarantee up to 80% of the principal, up to $50,000 on a commercial note. So that means that we are not giving a loan out, but we are guaranteeing the loan. So we're limiting the risk on the lender. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we can see if that's a viable option for you. And then also the Buy for Tomorrow Today. This is still a relevant website that we have going on. As you know, many of the businesses have decreased revenue and income. So this is a way for businesses to post their business online on a website where customers can connect with them and purchase gift cards and support them during this downturn. So hopefully you know about those. Additional programs, I'm going to fly through these. The SIC has their recovery fund, $100 million loan fund that's being managed through Sun Mountain Capital. SBIC, Small Business Investment Council, has supported several of our what are called CDFIs in the state, the Loan Fund, Dream Spring, Lift Fund, and HomeWise, and they are able to offer very low interest loans. NMFA has their Essential Services Working Capital Program. This is a great chance for essential businesses to have these emergency loans at a very low interest rate. Also, in terms of recovery efforts, want to make sure that everyone is aware of these programs. We are rolling out the Collateral Assistance Program. Again, this is for projects that need additional collateral. We can help with collateral if there's a shortfall. We are unrolling the Business Finance Finder, regional finance fairs. These are available on our website. LEDA, JTIP, making sure everyone knows about our respective offices within the Economic Development Department, Office of Science and Technology, Office of International Trade, Outdoor Rec, and Film. All are ready to go to provide you assistance. We have the Rural Efficient Business Program that will be rolling out at the end of summer. This is if you need help looking at your energy consumption or are considering renewable energy sources. That's available. Also, we will be conducting a statewide comprehensive economic development strategy. That's a long way of saying a long-term statewide plan. that'll be rolling out hopefully within the year, hiring a disaster recovery coordinator, and then excitedly in the special session, the Senate Bill 3 passed, which creates a $500 million loan program, $400 million of that going to small business, $100 million going to local government. And that we are waiting on the governor's signature. Hopefully, maybe that will even happen today to pass that into law. And that program will be administered through NMFA, that's the New Mexico Finance Authority. And they, I know, are working really diligently to get everything unrolled, hopefully within a month. So that'll be coming online soon. As I mentioned, going through these really quickly, please reach out if you have any questions. Here's where you can find information from EDD. We provide updates on our website. You can see that link at the top of the page. As well, we have been putting out a wrap-up of resources every week, and that comes out on Fridays. It's a really good way to stay on top of news, webinars, and grant and loan opportunities. And we have been putting our information and updates on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Whoops. For our opportunity zones, this is can be and is an exciting time to be able to gather up our steam again around opportunity zones. A lot of energy has been put in, obviously, providing relief around the COVID-19 pandemic. But like I said, we're really excited to begin the discussions again and really put focus on opportunity zones, looking at them as a potential tool and a really important tool for recovery efforts. So want to remind everyone that on our website, nmopportunity.com, this is where you can find all of the information and activity that EDD is putting out in relation to opportunity zones. This is where you can we have our map where you can access all of the designated zones. You can check to see if an address is in a zone. You can check to see that project pipeline that that shows all of the active projects that are soliciting funding or engaged in efforts in opportunity zones. You can access that and just stay up to date. You can also sign up for the email list. That's where we send out pertinent information to our folks that have signed up for that email list. You can submit projects there, see any upcoming webinars. As we all know, our in-person forums have taken a delay and backseat, but we will post information about any upcoming online opportunity zone forums. And then you also can connect with Fund It, which is the interagency task force that is able to help find funding opportunities for opportunity zone projects. So all of this, you can find it at nmopportunity.com. So encourage you to go there if you haven't already. And one last plug, make sure that you complete your 2020 census. This is very important to New Mexico in terms of how we can receive funding. So please take a few minutes. It takes, I did mine not too long ago, and it takes, I think, 5 minutes max. So please fill that out. So I'd like to go ahead and get started and introduce our guests. We have Rachel Riley and Catherine Lyons with the Economic Innovation Group, and we are really excited to have them. And I'd like to turn it over to Rachel and Catherine.
Thank you so much. And this is Catherine Lyons. I'm the manager of policy and coalitions for the Economic Innovation Group. Before I begin, just wondering if it's possible to advance the slides to our portion of the deck. Right now, for me at least, it's still showing the main or the introductory slide.
You know what, Catherine?
That is working now, actually.
Okay, yeah. And thank you so much for that. And I apologize On my end, I wasn't sharing my screen, so I was going through numerous slides. Um, so sorry about that. And as mentioned, everybody will get these slides.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much. Thank you again for having us. We're glad to be here and speaking with you all today. So I'll start off by giving just a quick overview of Economic Innovation Group and our role in the Opportunity Zones marketplace and with the development of the policy. So we are a bipartisan research and advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C. And we, about 5 years ago, kind of conceptualized Opportunity Zones and the outline of the incentive and really worked with the congressional champions after that kind of conceptualization phase into turning that into legislation, which of course was ultimately passed in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2017. It's a very kind of abridged version of our engagement there, but that's kind of what, that's been our role in the legislative process and Census passage. We were actively engaged with many of the governors during the short period that they had to designate their zones in early 2018. And since have been also kind of very involved in the regulatory framework and issuing comment letters on what needs to be done from the agency perspective to ensure this incentive really meets congressional intent in allowing the real diversity and variety of investments to take place in communities across the country. So I'll get a little bit more into some of our most recent activities as well. If you go to the next slide, we can start with a brief overview of our agenda for this portion of, or our portion of the webinar. So first we'll go over a little bit of the Opportunity Zones marketplace, starting with the end of last year through last month. Then we'll talk a little bit about the National Opportunity Zones survey that we conducted in May and some of the key findings that came from that survey, that really focused on what the impacts of COVID-19 are having on the market and projected impacts for future Opportunity Zones activity. Then we'll go briefly into a policy update, particularly focusing on the final regulations that were released at the end of last year, as well as some updated guidance that the IRS released last month pertaining to additional relief for some deadlines due to the pandemic. We will then go into my colleague Rachel will talk a little bit about the market updates, including examples of Opportunity Zones investments across the country, models for driving OZ investment into communities, and additional resources that we've developed to help with some of those activities, as well as they kind of, from our perspective, where the marketplace is going from here. Next slide. Thanks so much. So in terms of where the OZ marketplace was, particularly prior to the onset of COVID-19 and the economic disruption that's resulted from that. So the OZ marketplace was really kind of hitting its stride at the end of last year. As I mentioned, the final regulations were released at the end or in kind of middle of December 2019. And that really was incredibly helpful in providing the necessary clarity for investors and for communities to kind of fully formalize their strategies and their engagement in the marketplace. There was also, there's several different benefits that come along with the Opportunity Zone incentive. One of them expired at the end of last year, and so that certainly precipitated a lot of investment before that deadline in order to take advantage of the 15% step up in basis for investments that are held in project for 7 years or more. And so given the 2026 backstop date, those investments would have had to be made by before the end of 2019. So that certainly precipitated an uptick in activity in the market across the country as well. As you can see here, Novogradac & Company, a professional services accounting firm, has an Opportunity Fund directory on their site. That includes, hundreds of funds that they survey on a regular basis to try to get a sense of the scale of the market. And of course, it is just a subsection of the funds that they have access to through their listing, which is an opt-in listing. But still, I think it's a really helpful gauge of the growth of the market. And you can see here that just from January, there was 300 opportunity funds that they surveyed, had raised about $7.5 billion. By April, that had surpassed $10 billion and almost more than double the amount of opportunity funds that were listed, and they were able to survey for that purpose. So that kind of brought us to March, April, but of course economic conditions really started to change pretty dramatically with the onset of COVID-19, and that really kind of led to us wanting to take a closer look at how activity had been disrupted, and also how opportunity zone investors and other players within the market were thinking about their investments. You can go to the next slide. This is essentially just a visual of some of the market activity in the previous parts of this year that I was discussing. And you can see there the real precipitous kind of rise in the level of equity raised by the opportunity funds that were surveyed by Novogradac there. It's a steep climb. You can go to the next slide. So our National Opportunity Zone Survey, we released this in around mid-May, had it open for a couple of weeks through near the end of the month. And we kind of scoped our outreach to stakeholders who were raising capital or facilitating deal flow in opportunity zones across the country. You can see here the breakdown of respondents that we had. We had 108 opportunity zone stakeholders across multiple categories. Fund managers was definitely the majority of respondents. 42% of all respondents were in that category, followed by kind of qualified opportunity zone, business, real estate project sponsors specifically, service providers of both legal and accounting, as well as consultants and brokers, made up a significant chunk of the responses as well. And then we did have some business owners, capital providers, and some of the local opportunity zones coordinators as part of the mix as well. In terms of the types of investments that some of these folks were kind of focusing on, their activities in, it really kind of mixed use and residential real estate was definitely the most commonly targeted. 64% said mixed use, 62% residential real estate. Workforce housing is another commonly targeted asset. 55% said that they were looking into those. And while this may be kind of aspirational, it's still very heartening to see that in entrepreneurship and operating businesses, 54% said that they were looking into or already working on investments in that space as well, which is great, given that that's certainly the intent of the incentive is to facilitate not only kind of improving the built environment, but also capitalizing small and new businesses in these opportunity zones as well. Go to the next slide. So here's the key findings, and definitely encourage you to go to our website where we posted the survey findings in much more detail, and we can certainly share that with the organizers after this to make sure that you see that link. But just an overview of the key findings here. No surprise that, of course, recent economic conditions have certainly had a bit of a chilling effect on the OZ marketplace. At the time that this was being taken, and I do think that that's important to know, this was around mid-May. Of course, circumstances are changing rapidly. There was a point of time, in early June where things were looking better. Obviously, things are sort of taking a turn in certain states. So I just wanted to caveat some of that in that, the market conditions are changing rapidly and unexpectedly in some cases, in some places as well. But that said, 52% reported the crisis had a negative impact on their OZ activities. Honestly, we would have potentially even thought that would have been higher, just given the unprecedented level of economic challenges and disruptions that so many businesses and communities are facing right now, and the uncertainty that's coming along with this global health crisis. So some investors are kind of waiting for signals of market stability and a little bit more certainty rather than before finalizing investment decisions. But the majority of respondents said that investors are remaining engaged in the marketplace, and some are even looking for new places to place their capital as well. The crisis has certainly impacted OZ stakeholders in a variety of ways. Some may reduce their engagement. Some who were thinking about entering the market but hadn't yet, may decide that they're not going to. But I think what's positive is that we're also seeing many double down over the long term. This is an incentive that really prioritizes or incentivizes patient capital over the course of 10 years. That's when you really see the full suite of benefits if you hold your investment for that long. And so that may actually be kind of playing to an advantage here in that the long-term nature of this may actually be kind of helpful in this moment. The majority of the respondents remain optimistic about the future of the OZ marketplace, and so that was of course very positive for us to hear. But some of that optimism is kind of hinged or depending upon what local and government, but mostly what Congress does to kind of strengthen and enhance the incentive in a way that makes it particularly powerful as a tool to facilitate a more equitable recovery. Specifically, one of the policy questions that we asked about in the survey was related to the extension of the 2026 deadline, and a majority of respondents, I believe 64%, said that an extension of that would be particularly beneficial to their work. Go to the next slide. So I'll spend a couple minutes here going through the December 2019 final regulations with a particular focus on what it does for some community and some of the land held by local governments as well, because there was some additional clarity and some flexibility provided in the regulations on those points. Generally, the regulations were very helpful in that it provided the clarity that was needed for investors, for communities, to facilitate more investments in operating businesses, to increase the supply of capital into the OZ market, to provide communities with flexibility to address vacancy and blight, and I'll go into some of those specifics in a moment, remove uncertainty around key terms and definitions, and also to address some of the address abuse, so kind of put in some anti-abuse provisions as defined by Treasury as well. So with a little bit more on the blight, the vacancy and blight, as I think this may be particularly poignant as you are kind of thinking about your opportunities on strategy for your communities and how it might be most applicable. So first of all, there was an allowance of the aggregation of certain buildings to be treated as single property for purposes of the substantial improvement test. For a little bit of background, in order to qualify as an opportunity zone investment, the kind of property or the investment itself must be either original use to the zone, or it must be substantially improved within 30 months. And substantial improvement is a relatively high threshold. It is essentially 100% of the basis, so you need to double your investment in the property itself in order to meet that substantial improvement threshold. And so what was not clear in previous rounds of regulations was how to kind of really assess substantial improvements and whether or not you're meeting that threshold, particularly for buildings kind of made within the same investment decision, and also especially for businesses too. How do you substantially improve a business, and what counts? Is it every piece of inventory, or is it the kind of aggregate of the business itself, things like that. So the regulations did provide some really helpful clarity in how to assess that. In terms of additional flexibility for vacant property, the regulations were particularly helpful in that let's see, the vacant property definition previously was, 5 years. The property would have to have been vacant for 5 years in order to qualify as original use. We were hoping to see that reduced, and indeed it was, to 3 years with a couple of kind of caveats there, but that's the kind of general rule of thumb. Additionally, if a fund or a business, a qualified opportunity zone business, purchases property from a local government, and that local government, pulls that property as a result of an involuntary transfer, they may treat that property as original use. So instead of having to do the substantial improvement requirements and invest, the doubling of the basis, you can actually count that as original use. So that was, an interesting and certainly favorable decision on behalf of Treasury and IRS, and particularly for local communities that may hold a lot of property as well. So on the kind of moderate expansion of events that can delay the working capital safe harbor. So essentially, qualified opportunities on businesses have a working capital safe harbor of 31 months to deploy their capital, as needed. For just federally declared disaster areas, is an additional 24 months that can be added on to that working capital safe harbor, and a couple other kind of provisions that are and flexibility that's put in place for areas that fall under that category. There's generally just I think an expansion of what counts for delays, whether it's like permitting, the delays, things like that, that are also incorporated into allowing for some flexibility in meeting that safe harbor as well. One really important point that we were really pleased to see was, oh, I'm sorry, if you can go back one more slide. Go back to the slide that I was at previously on the regulations. Perfect, thank you so much. So on the brownfield remediation, so essentially the regulation stated that for brownfields, land and buildings, they can be treated as original use as well. So again, that's great to see that the kind of less burdensome sort of path is made available for brownfields. And finally, for local government property, there are more favorable and flexible leasing and vacancy rules for that as well. So I went over some of the vacancy rules, but for leasing, essentially, you do not need to, if the government is leasing to a qualified opportunity zone business, the market rate requirement is waived as well. So that could be particularly useful in meeting some of the community needs and strategies too. Sorry, next slide now, thanks. So just early last month, IRS, after requests from several parties, including Senator Tim Scott, the congressional champion, in the Senate on this, as well as the congressional champions in the House. We submitted a letter on this as well as several others, just asking for some relief for the upcoming deadlines that many funds were facing, and felt, that they likely would not be able to meet, because of COVID-19. There's just been this is something that our survey helped illuminate as well, is there's just been a real disruption in daily operations, as I'm sure we're all feeling, relative to not being able to travel, to conduct due diligence, for certain cities that require in-person meetings to, approve a project, or improve, certain phases of a project. Those just aren't happening now. And so, it's been harder to deploy capital into projects, and to keep those projects moving at a pace that may be required by some of the timelines in the opportunity zone statute. And so, we asked for some additional guidance and relief from Treasury and IRS, and they provided that in a few ways. So the first way is that, if you are a taxpayer and an investor who realized a capital gain, you have 180 days to put that gain into a fund. But again, that may be a little bit difficult in these times. And so if your 180-day period ends anytime between April 1st, 2020 and the end of this year, you can postpone that until the end of this year. So you don't actually have to put your capital into a fund until the end of this year. If you are a fund and you are trying to deploy 90% of your capital into qualifying investments, and again are having trouble for all the reasons that I just mentioned in doing that, but need to satisfy the test, which for many funds comes around the June 30th date, so actually just a couple of days ago. They offered that if you fail that for any reason between April 1st and the end of the year, you automatically have reasonable cause. So you will not face a penalty that otherwise would be levied for missing that threshold. As I mentioned, the substantial improvement test and the 30 months that you have to substantially improve kind of a property or a business. For investments undergoing that, essentially the period between April 1st and December 31st is tolled. So it essentially just won't count towards that 30 months. And then additionally for the federally declared disaster area, what essentially Treasury and IRS said is that the whole country at the moment is a federally declared disaster area, given the declaration of a national emergency that I believe happened in March. And so given that, OZ businesses that will qualify for relief for allowing the 24 months in addition to the 31-month working capital safe harbor, and they will also get an additional 12 months to reinvest proceeds from the return of capital or the sale or disposition of opportunity zone property. So that will all be incredibly helpful, I think, in just allowing a little bit of extra time, a little flexibility to both investors and fund managers who are eager to, continue with their strategies, but may be experiencing a hiccup, understandably, during these times. Next slide, and I believe at this point I am turning it over to Rachel. Yes, so I will turn it over to my colleague Rachel to take it from here and start giving some real tangible examples of investments across the country.
Yeah, thank you so much, Catherine, and really appreciate the opportunity to join everyone today. What we want to share here is that Opportunity Zone investments are really creating a diverse range of impacts across the country. We have an Opportunity Zone activity map, which I'll discuss a little bit later, that plots the different investments, funds, and initiatives that are occurring across the nation. And so we wanted to just provide a few examples of what we're seeing in cities across the country and describe some of the impacts that are occurring. So in Minnesota, right at the top, we have expansion of access to affordable and quality health care for veterans. This is a joint venture through Capstone Investment and Squared 18, which has just launched a fund to invest in Veterans Affairs hospitals and clinics. And this first investment that they've made in Minnesota will expand access to primary care and mental health services for veterans located in Minnesota. The second example here in Montana is a really important one because the city is more of a high-cost city, but they currently are experiencing a shortage of workforce housing. So think about affordable housing opportunities for your frontline workers. And some of the government programs that are currently positioned to provide subsidies for affordable housing, sometimes the threshold that they can meet is just 60% of area median income. And so it's sometimes joked about the worst place to be is someone earning 61% of area median income because you don't qualify for housing subsidies and you can't move into low-income housing tax credit properties in most cases. And so this project here is filling a big housing need in the community and doing so through Opportunity Zone financing. And this is a great project brought to us by Catalyst Opportunity Funds. This third project here in Braddock, PA, Braddock definitely was hit hard by the contraction of the steel industry. They lost over 80% of their population due to that. And a startup company called Fifth Seasons has created a new vertical farming operation. It's really innovative. It's solar powered, fully automated. And really, they could have located anywhere, but they chose this Opportunity Zone, also noting that it is a food desert and they are able to expand access to fresh and affordable food to the community, as well as create a bridge to jobs. So folks are being hired to work there. It's not the solution to job creation because they can't hire everyone to meet the full demand around employment, but it's at least training folks for jobs that are geared towards the 21st century. In Orlando, this property is called Paramore Oaks, and we actually have an investment profile on our website, which again, I'll talk about a little bit later, that fully goes through all the sources of financing used to bring this project to fruition. Most notably, it leveraged the low-income housing tax credit in addition to opportunity zone financing to create 124 units of housing, 96 of which are affordable, and they have a covenant of 50 years, so they will remain affordable for the next 50 years. This is a really important project because the residents had noted concern around displacement due to its location adjacent to the downtown core of Orlando. And they said that they needed additional affordable housing and market rate housing in order to ensure that there's sufficient supply in the market and that they would not be displaced. In Washington, D.C., there's a great project called MLK Gateway. It leveraged a number of sources of financing, including new market tax credits, and 2 opportunity zone investors came to the table to help support this deal. But in addition to revitalizing vacant storefronts and dilapidated property along a Main Street corridor in a historically underinvested community of Anacostia, one of the project sponsors called Enlightened, they're a minority-owned tech firm that is currently headquartered in the Central Business District of DC. They are actually committed to relocating their entire firm to this community, to this property, which will bring 150 employees to MLK Gateway, which will increase the daytime traffic, pedestrian traffic in the community and really support the local economy there. In Chicago, a startup company called Solve just received an investment from an opportunity fund named Verte OZ, and Verte is very much dedicated to supporting startup businesses and entrepreneurs through 10-year investments. Startup is a really cool company. They have a tech platform that helps connect underrepresented job seekers to employment opportunities and other support services, and Verte invested in them during the pandemic to support their expansion strategy, just understanding the huge employment needs that we currently face. In Memphis, the city is actually partnering with a company called StartCo, as well as the university. We talk a lot about how we engage anchor institutions, and here you have an example of the University of Memphis doing so, but also in conjunction with Downtown Memphis Commission. And this is we call it an OpCo-PropCo strategy, where you're investing in operating businesses plus real estate. So that's the prop and the PropCo. And this tandem effort will also provide laptops and internet and training to 1,000 families in the community, which is historically underinvested in as well. And then in San Bernardino, California, this is an example of how opportunity funds can work with local government in order to address a lack of upfront capital expenses, or I guess investment to address capital needs. So if you're a local government who may have just seen some of your budget reduced due to budget shortfalls, but you have priority projects that need to be invested in, such as offices or schools or a new city hall, opportunity funds are out there to help build and invest in those properties if there is a long-term contract typically associated with it. And so that was the model here with Rev OZ in California. They built a pre-lease, built-to-suit medical office for the county. and it's going to house the county's children behavioral clinic, their back office services. Next slide. So, those are really great projects. What I want to note is that they were structured intentionally with community partners at the table. In order to drive impact, you really have to bake that into your impact thesis as an opportunity fund. Communities should very much be engaged. And so there are a number of different ways from different stakeholder perspectives in which we're seeing OZ investment being driven towards community priorities. So from the opportunity fund perspective, Arcturus Impact Investors has just launched an initiative to create city-centric investment programs, which means that they actually have an RFP out right now seeking information and proposals from local mayors and other local government officials to tell Arcturus what their local needs are, what their investment priorities are in opportunity zones. And the whole hope is that we can invest OZ capital into projects that didn't have immediate financing available. The strategy that they're taking is Arcturus Impact Investors will come to the table with 80% of the capital, but the city has to engage local anchor institutions like corporations and philanthropic partners to bring the additional 20% of the capital to the table. They just announced their first investment in Erie, Pennsylvania, and it was a $40 million investment. And the other two groups that have supported this investment are Erie Insurance, so the city's Fortune 500 company, which has been very committed to downtown redevelopment, as well as investments into local businesses in opportunity zones for the past 2 years. And in addition to that, the Erie Community Foundation has also provided capital to support the initiative in Erie. Arcturus is picking up to 10 cities in which to invest, and so that is the first of the targeted 10 cities, which will be announced later. Just shared information about Erie, so want to highlight their opportunity zone business, which is really driving the real estate effort to revitalize their downtown core. Erie Downtown Development Corporation has stated that they had a redevelopment timeline for revitalizing the city's downtown area, but that opportunity zone equity has accelerated that timeline by approximately 5x. And their strategy really is to phase multiple sources of capital. So they have a patient source of debt financing in which they acquire property, and then as they are out raising opportunity zone equity, they can continue to acquire property and do site preparation, and then they can activate the opportunity zone equity as soon as they're ready to do that value add or value creation. Just given the timelines, it's really important, I think, to phase in capital as that is available to folks. And then for from the community side, community perspective, one of the biggest benefits that we've seen thus far of opportunity zones is that it's created all of these local ecosystems of intermediaries and new stakeholders that are really focused on community and economic development, and has organized those folks in a way that they are collaborating and bringing new solutions to the table. Opportunity Investment Consortium of Indiana, I think, has done a great job of sort of organizing the different buckets of stakeholders. And so this is a statewide effort where they have community development financial institutions, investors, so like private wealth firms, RIAs, as well as local foundations, developers, service providers, like folks that can provide legal and accounting expertise, in addition to state agencies at the table to help organize the OZ ecosystem and develop a pipeline of projects. And so That is happening at the state level, but this model can definitely be applied to cities and regions as well. Next slide. So I mentioned our opportunity zone activity map, which is on our website. If you go to eig.org, under the Opportunity Zones tab, you'll see all of our Opportunity Zone resources there. And we really are trying to provide as much information as possible, not only on market activity, but also resources that communities and others can use to replicate or apply to their own strategy or their own situation, unique situation. And so the Opportunity Zone map, you can modify it. There's different filters that you can apply, but it is there for you. I think we have over 200 data points currently plotted on the map for folks to explore. Next slide. And then in addition to that, we've created a few opportunity zone investment profiles for both real estate and business. This is an example of an investment profile. It's just a screenshot of half the first page, but this is for Proximity, which is an operating business in Montrose, Colorado. They, as part of their fundraising, their current fundraising round, have received 3 opportunity zone investments, which equals about half of the total funds that they've been able to raise thus far. But it goes through the full background about Proximity, as well as provides more information on the capital stack, different sources of financing, and the impact that this financing will have in their expansion strategy. And so if you go to the Opportunity Zone map, there's also a tab for the profiles. Next slide. This is another profile that we did on a project called the Tap-In in Cleveland, Ohio. It's mixed use. 60% of the units are affordable to the local workforce. The ground floor has space for a local baker. And this is another great example of how Opportunity Zone capital is being leveraged to provide some relief in the capital stack, which has helped to lower rents. This developer also has right of first refusal once the main investor exits out of the fund. And so we always talk about sustainable strategies for recapturing or ensuring that the wealth that's created remains in the communities. So the project sponsor, which is Sustainable Community Associates, has the right to purchase the share from the Opportunity Zone investor and therefore retain ownership of this property once that investor is ready to exit. Again, this is on our website if you need. And I will say, in addition to that, the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council has also published a number of resources, including 2 volumes of a community toolkit, which I think is really helpful in walking communities through different frameworks for thinking about how they can approach an opportunity zone strategy. And then most recently, they have published a best practices document, which highlights a number of different investments that have been made, as well as how federal funding is also supporting investments in opportunity zones. So if you guys are looking for inspiration or strategies, that best practices document is a really great resource. And you can find all of that on, I believe it's opportunityzones.gov. Next slide. So where we go from here, Catherine did a great job going over and reviewing the state of the current marketplace. You know, the onset of the pandemic had a negative effect on nearly half of those that we surveyed. But even since that survey in May, we're hearing increased optimism, even from the folks that indicated a negative impact. And as the survey also noted, there was a general optimism about the future of the marketplace as well. And I think it just really underpins that this is a nascent marketplace. It is still emerging, but there's generally an underlying resiliency that's meant to support long-term investing. And so people are really taking a long-term view as to these opportunities. What I think has been laid bare and something that we've probably all known is that residents and businesses residing in opportunity zones are acutely at risk of economic impact, and residents especially for health impact as well. And opportunity zones, we very much think, can be utilized as a tool in the broader toolkit of financing resources that can help support economic recovery efforts. What the survey also elevated was that a lot of the folks that are operating within the opportunity zone landscape definitely see an extension of the current investment deadline, which is currently 2026, an extension of that as being key to ensuring that investors remain engaged and that the opportunity zone benefit can fully be maximized to support economic recovery efforts. And then also highlighted the need to continue to support local capacity building to ensure that communities are well positioned for opportunity zones investment. So, cautiously optimistic. We are continuing to see some good investment activity, some really great initiatives that are emerging to address COVID-related issues, and we will continue to keep everyone updated. Please, again, visit our website for the latest, eig.org. And I believe we will turn it over from there.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel, and thanks, Catherine. That was really great. So
Okay.
we wanted to briefly go over and invite one of our really good partners in the city of Albuquerque, and that's Monica Mitchell, who is with the Albuquerque City Economic Development Department. And Monica was going to give us some insight into what a local government, a public body in New Mexico is doing around opportunity zones. And then we will take your questions for Catherine, Rachel, and Monica. So Monica, are you able to see the screen? And
I'm here.
Okay, great.
I'm here. So good afternoon. Thank you so much to New Mexico Economic Development and EIG. I'm happy to be here. So just to give you guys a brief overview of opportunity zones in Albuquerque, we have 68 eligible census tracts in Bernalillo County, 22 which were submitted to the governor for consideration. And out of those 22, we ended up with 14 census tracts that were selected as qualified opportunity zones. These opportunity zones covered 7 of our 9 city council districts and included 456 square miles of the city. Prior to COVID, I was working on rolling out both an economic development incentives map that included opportunity zones and their benefits, as well as other opportunity zone perspectives. The map in terms of opportunity zones is helpful because it helps us to illustrate to those interested in our community, the opportunity zone areas within Albuquerque, and it helps determine, sites and what sites are best for them, as well as available incentives that apply to those specific properties or locations, including, foreign trade zones, metropolitan redevelopment areas, new market tax credits, and other incentives. So in addition, we had added customized infographics to all the census tracts within Albuquerque to show demographics and key indicators that we believe are important to those investing in our community, such as total population, number of households, median household income, total businesses, education, lifestyle spending, internet access. And then the prospectus was developed to really market those opportunity zones to discuss the benefits Albuquerque as a whole, such as, quality of life, culture, business, education, workforce, benefits of investing in opportunity zones as a whole, the key industries that we are interested in focusing on, directed energy, commercial space, film and digital media, mobility, smart technology. And then we also wanted to dive into each opportunity zone to discuss, the area as a whole, the key assets within those opportunity zones, and then, the key demographics and the primary zoning types in each. But COVID did put a little bit of a pause on our work in opportunity zones. But we're working to refocus back on those initiatives, and we are definitely still meeting with interested parties and talking about expansion in Albuquerque. And of course, we're always focused on retention and working with the businesses that are all still currently contributing to our local economy. So, hopefully we just keep working on opportunity zones and keep pushing the message about these benefits. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. And I've got your contact info pulled up. Gives us a really good idea about what's going on. And so now I'd like to open it up for questions. And I will get those read if I'm having a bit of technical trouble today. I apologize about that. Let's see, Rachel and Catherine, anything else you want to add before we open it up?
Yeah, I'll just share that EIG has an Opportunity Zones Coalition, which includes OZ stakeholders, so investors, fund managers, businesses, community development organizations, all dedicated to inclusive growth in opportunity zones. And so if folks are interested in learning more about that, please reach out to us and we can provide more information.
Great, thank you. And how often does that coalition meet?
We have standing meetings twice a month, and then we also do additional programming, especially around key moments or points. So if additional regulatory guidance comes out or there are new initiatives that we want to highlight, we hold Ask the Experts series where we feature coalition members. So we just did that recently with the updated guidance in June, as well as when the National OZ survey came out, we held additional meetings where we actually asked experts and coalition members to weigh in on both of those things.
That's great. Okay, we had a question from Channing, and the question is, what specific regulations exist to ensure investors interact with and are beholden to the community in which they invest?
There's no statute, or that's not part of the statute, but we are seeing really great models where communities, are leveraging publicly owned land, or even privately owned land, where it's an anchor institution like a university or a major employer that owns that property, to either through a ground lease or otherwise dictate the use of that property. Additionally, if public subsidy or other resources are being layered into a capital stack, covenants can be put on use based on eligibility and receiving those sources of financing. Opportunity zones is, it's very unlikely that it's ever going to be 100% of the entire capital stack. And so it's likely that additional sources of financing will be leveraged, and that's a great opportunity to either require or encourage investors towards a certain use or activity.
Yeah, in addition to that too, we are seeing some kind of localities and states layer on additional incentives for, thinking of Maryland, for example, put in place a state law that allowed for additional incentives for projects that reported a certain level of kind of impact and also kind of developed a community benefit agreement as well. So I think there are kind of some creative ways that can be done or creative policies that can be layered on at the state or local level to encourage both kind of additional reporting of some of the projects and the activities, but also encouraging community engagement within the investments as well.
Thanks. And that brings up a point too, Catherine, that the state of New Mexico, we do have our Local Economic Development Act program, which is a grant fund that is able to help companies pay for land, building, or infrastructure to qualified companies. And if a business is located in an opportunity zone, that guarantees at least $1 million, up to $1 million invested into that project. So the point being is, if there is a project in New Mexico that isn't an opportunity zone, it's a really important fact to connect with the state economic development department to explore not only our incentive program, but to connect with that interagency task force that we have to see what other incentives are available. So really encourage everybody to reach out. We had one other question. This is from Craig. Is capital beyond the rollover capital gains allowed to be invested in opportunity zone funds?
Yeah, so the only type of capital that is eligible for the tax incentives are capital gains. But that said, and as Rachel mentioned, we are seeing many other sources of capital invested into these opportunity zones projects in order to fully complete the capital stack, and that's certainly allowed. But the only type of capital that is eligible for the incentive are capital gains.
Okay, great. We have one other question, and it's kind of a question getting at resources. Can you all recommend kind of a helpful resource that you have found for businesses that are exploring opportunity zone funding?
Yeah, I would again take a look at the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council website and their best practices document. As far as a 101 or a technical assistance guide, that is something that we've heard from a number of different stakeholders is needed. And so I think there are folks that are working on rolling something out, but I don't have additional details beyond that.
Okay, great. And that's also another, I think, chance to point people in the direction of our state website. If you do have questions, you can utilize that site, and we link to a number of resources, and also throw out that invitation too to reach out to our department or the regional representatives for our department, and we'd love to help point you in the right direction. So I do want to be conscious of the time. I know we're right at time, and I apologize again about our technical challenges at the beginning, but we'll go ahead and wrap up. And if you have additional questions that we didn't get to, we will address those afterward, and we will send the presentation out. We will send the link to the YouTube channel. And I want to thank Rachel and Catherine and Monica. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's an odd timing right before the holiday, but I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July and hope everybody stays safe out there. So thank you guys very much. Thanks for being such a great partner, and thanks for all your work you've done on this program.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye. Take care.